One of the first topics we covered on the Pesky Games was slut shaming, but that judgment swings both ways. So this week we're going to be talking about the other side of that virgin whore dichotomy, which is prude shaming. Before I start, I will quickly just say that this video does bring up some potentially triggering things to do with rape culture and victim blaming and prude shaming, so consider this a trigger warning right now. The clearest distinction for me between slut shaming and prude shaming and how they relate to each other is that slut shaming is when people are shamed for the times when they say yes, and prude shaming is when people are shamed for the times when they say no. And both come from this idea that a woman's sexuality is not her own to command. Women are expected to be constantly sexually available to any potential suitors, but at the same time, we're not actually supposed to have sex, and if we do, we're not supposed to enjoy it. It's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't situations. If you have sex, and especially if you have sex and you enjoy sex, then you're a skanky slut. But if you don't have sex, or if you refuse, then you're a frigid prude. And a big part of this stems from our idea of virginity, and especially when you get into your late teens, there's this huge social stigma around whether you're a virgin or not, whether you've had sex. We have films like the American Pie series, where, you know, people competing to try and lose their virginity before they go off to college or university. Or you'll hear comedians joking about how they didn't lose their virginity until they were in their late 20s or 30s, with the implication that this is somehow funny because it makes them this outcast loser. But virginity is nothing more than this incredibly sexist, heteronormative social construct. I mean, when do you lose your virginity? It can't be when your hymen breaks, because that never actually happens. So presumably then it's the first time you have sex, but then does oral sex count? Or is it only penetrative sex? And then what counts there? Does a finger count? Does a dildo count? And what if you have a penis? Does it only count if you're penetrating a vagina? My first sexual experiences were all with women. And for years I had this huge cognitive dissonance that I could go my entire life having sex, but never lose my virginity. And even though I knew that consciously that was nonsense, I felt this jarring that I'd imagined myself as like this 90-year-old queer virgin, which just felt really weird to me. And that's part of the problem with this socially constructed idea we have about virginity and this stigma about how it's apparently a shameful thing to have not had sex. It's not about whether you actually want to have sex, or whether you want to have this very particular kind of heterosexual penetrative sex. Often it's barely even about who you have sex with. It's just something that you're supposed to want, because it puts this pressure on people to acquiesce and just agree to have sex with people because they feel like it's something that they have to just get over with. Just, well, okay, I've done that now, so now I can get on with my life because I'm not a virgin anymore, hooray. And even after you've lost your virginity, or, you know, lied to your friends about losing your virginity just so they'll stop making fun of you, we still put this pressure on people through the numbers game. How many people have you had sex with? And if you've had sex with too many people, then that makes you a slut, and that's something to be ashamed of. But if you've not had sex with enough people, for example, even if you've been with the same person for your entire life, so you've only ever had sex with one person, that's weird, and that makes you like a prude. So that's also something to be ashamed of. So you have to find some magic number in the middle, which is like the perfect number of people to have slept with to be normal. And this is a huge part of our victim blaming rape culture, this idea that sex is something that people always want, that sex is always a good thing. In particular, if you're someone who's not considered conventionally sexually attractive, for example, if you're disabled, or if you're fat, or even just if you have low self-esteem and you just think that you're ugly, there's this idea that you should just be grateful for any kind of sexual attention that you can get, because really, who'd want you? That's such an awful way for a person to have to feel. And the last part of this assumption that sex is something that everyone wants, that everyone always wants at all times and is always a good thing, is that if you don't want sex, then there's something wrong with you, that you must have a hormonal imbalance or something, or you've just not met the right person. You just need to figure out the right situation and it'll be fine. Which completely excludes and alienates asexual people who just don't want to have sex. The same way some people aren't interested in sex with men, and some people aren't interested in sex with women, and some people aren't interested in sex with certain body types. some people just aren't interested in sex at all, and that doesn't mean that they need to get fixed, whatever your sexuality. Let me know in the comments if you feel comfortable doing so, how you feel about prude shaming, whether you've ever been prude shamed, whether you've ever been accused of being too sexually conservative, and how this has made you feel. I think it's really important that if we are going to tackle rape culture, that we do have these discussions about prude shaming just as much as we have things like the slut walks. And I'll see you next Monday.